My mother died and left me her house with a final wish of no renovations to be done on it. I understand why now. Part 3. This is a day later than I met, but something has happened that prevented me from being able to update. I don't know where to begin, so I'll try to type what I can. We tried that experiment a few of you suggested. Instead of our blood, we tried animal blood. It took some convincing Jacob to leave the house, but I managed. I reminded him the door probably wasn't going anywhere. We live in a mid-sized town, probably about 7,000-ish people, but it was surprisingly hard to find an actual butcher. Finally, we found one downtown. He seemed puzzled when I asked for a few gallons of a few different animal bloods, but by the suggestions of ewe/rib, nag, I told him I was simply trying to duplicate my grandma's blood pudding recipe. He shrugged and found us a gallon of pig blood, a gallon of cow blood, and a small thing of chicken blood. He didn't charge us, just mumbled, knew these would be good for something. We promised him some of the pudding later. I still feel bad for lying. Pulling up to the house, Jacob was unbuckled and opened the car door before we came to a complete stop, and darted toward the house. His hands were shaking, trying to put the key in the lock. I offered to do it for him, but he insisted that he needed to. I noticed the scars on his hands that looked fresh. I think he had been going in the door without me, but I didn't think to confront him on it. I convinced myself that I just didn't notice them before. He managed, got the door open, and ran towards the door, urging me to hurry up with the blood. I decided to try a little of each, one at a time. Uncapping the gallon of cow blood, I slowly poured what I estimated to be a couple tablespoons worth in. Like our blood, it soaked right into the bowl, but something was off about it. For a second, it began to soak right in, but I fucking swear it was slower. When the blood was fully soaked in, I felt the air temperature drop just a little. The door didn't budge, and Jacob was nervously biting his fingernails. We tried the pig blood next, pouring a little more than the cow blood in. Just like the cow blood, it began to soak quickly, but then slowed. Again, the air became colder, but I swear I heard a quiet groan from the door. I saw Jacob shiver just a little. He cracked a joke that a ghost must be screwing with us. At this stage, it was a little hard for me to laugh at that because nothing seemed impossible anymore. Not since I first bled into that damn bowl. I poured the chicken blood and didn't even try to guess how much I just poured. The bowl didn't even soak the blood, but something else happened. The door groaned louder and the air felt like ice. Jacob was shaking at this point, but so was I, both from the air and from absolute fear. The groaning stopped, but like something on the other side had battering ram. There were 5 or 6 very, very loud bangs on the door. I stumbled back, letting out a scream that's louder than I cared to admit. Jacob just stood there, petrified. The bowl began to regurgitate the blood we poured in, and then some, spilling it over the flood. Like a panicked animal, I scrambled away from it, but it began to soak Jacob's shoes. I yelled his name, but his eyes were fixated on the door. We made her mad. We made them mad, Elliot, he said shakily. Then the blood stopped pouring, and the banging stopped. Mustering what strength I could, I stood up, my legs threatening to give out. I grabbed Jacob and bolted out the door. My panicked hands took several minutes to find the key and start the car. Jacob just stared ahead. Barely more than a whisper, I heard him say, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry we tried to lie to you." He sounded like a child, like he was 8 again. We drove out of town, far, far away, as far as I was concerned that the entire town could burn to the ground. But Jacob kept talking under his breath. All I could catch were, "Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry," over and over again. I wanted to keep driving and forget about that house. I wanted to burn it to the ground myself and have a priest bury the ashes. I don't know how long we drove, but we ended up stopping in a tiny little motel. The room smelled like stale cigarettes, Lysol, and piss, but there was no bleeding bowl, so I'll take it. I tried to sleep, but Jacob had me concerned. All he did was pace around the room mumbling. I tried to talk to him. I tried to tell him whatever is in that house isn't our parents, but he wouldn't listen. I looked at his face and realized it was far paler than usual. Just in the past few days, his light blonde hair had thinned, and the bags under his eyes could probably be used to carry groceries. I snapped and damn near screamed, "Jacob, did you go in without me?" He stopped pacing and his bottom lip quivered. I asked again and he turned to me. "Yes," he said in the same childlike voice. "Jacob, how many times?" No reply. "Answer me, man. How many times?" Slowly he lifted his shirt, revealing what I can only compare to a road map drawn on skin. All across the front and back of his body was riddled with scars. There was some large, some small. They were all large, horrific scars like someone had whipped him to death in a past life. His arms were almost unrecognizable. There was more scar tissue than flesh. He locked eyes with me and finally broke down crying. We promised that we would never go back to that house again. With that, we finally fell asleep. But here's where my panic set in. More than the bleeding bull, more than the door banging, and more than the evil I experienced in that house, the fear didn't come till morning, when I woke up and I couldn't find Jacob. My mother died and left me her house. Final. My name is Jacob Grease, and I don't know where to begin, other than to say I am so sorry. I found this log that Elliot had apparently been keeping, updating you guys on everything. Well, everything that he knew, at the very least. Before I tell you what has happened, what I learned, and never told Elliot, all of you need to know why I did what I did. Elliot mentioned that I don't have as many memories with our parents as he did. That's true. But you need to understand why. I am younger than my brother, but only by 2 years. Honestly, I was never the favorite as much as I wanted to be. Our parents were kind, honest, hardworking people who loved us both dearly, but it was clear they loved my brother the most. I can't blame them. I was never the brightest. I was never the athletic one. I never made people's jaws drop when I spoke. I had my own successes, but nothing that quite measured up to his. Some part of me resented him for it. A larger part of me just envied him. When we hit middle school, I acted out. My grades suffered. I was angry at most things and apathetic towards everything else. I discovered the bliss of Mary Jane and stealing liquor. I cursed at teachers and became an all-around shitty person. I won't lie and say I did it for attention. I did it just because I wanted to. Elliot discovered his athletic talents in 8th grade. Joining the football team, he was easily one of the best. I know because our parents dragged me to every game he had. I wanted to be proud of him, but I was too damn angry. Finally, when the school threatened me with expulsion, my parents opted to send me to a boarding school, 4 hours away. They did it for me because I left them no alternative. The school was strict, borderline military. Any shit I might have gotten away with back home will not fly an inch there. I was pissed, but now I see it was what I needed. I wish I knew that then, because there were times when I wouldn't simply refuse to go home for holidays. I wouldn't write. I wouldn't call unless forced to. I was a bastard. I missed birthdays, holiday celebrations. I didn't care. So Elliot was right. I didn't have as many memories with them because I didn't want them. The same year my father died was the same year I stopped being a little bastard and acting like an adult. I scraped through my freshman and sophomore years and actually made the honor roll my junior and senior years. My dad died, almost proud of me. That word almost will haunt me for ages to come. Elliot and I rebonded after high school. I managed to, somehow, get into one of the community colleges and him a large university on a full ride. He helped me to get a decent job at a car parts factory that I actually didn't hate. Our mother tried to connect with me, but some resentful and guilty part of me pushed her away. I hated myself for that after she died, but she never stopped loving me. A couple weeks after her funeral, when Elliot and I heard the will reading, we went to her old house. It's odd. I'm not even remotely spiritual or religious person, but I can only describe the feeling of the house, like her energy was gone. You know, You know enough about me for now. Let's talk a little about my mother. I went wandering through the house while Elliot stayed downstairs, hoping I wouldn't hear him cry. I went into Mom's old room, not sure if I should pack everything or leave it be. It felt wrong to move anything. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling tears coming on myself, trying to distract myself. I got up and walked to the far end of the room, and that's when I noticed it. It was very thin, but I could make out the outline of a door on her wall, like someone plastered over it. I wanted to tell Elliot, but no. He needed to be alone for a bit. I pressed my hand very lightly onto the covered door, barely more than a nudge, but that's somehow all it took. With the loud sound of splitting wood, it gave away. I found myself stumbling forward, falling into a fairly small, dark room. Elliot called out from below, "Hey, everything okay?" A little dazed, I just yelled back, "Yeah, I think." I heard him making his way quickly upstairs towards me. I pulled myself up and let my eyes adjust to the room. On the small shelves on each wall, there were books. Most bound in dark leather, but others with thin paper covers. A circle of melted black candles sat towards the front center, surrounding the symbol. I couldn't make heads or tails of. At least, not at first. Elliot came into the bedroom and saw the gaping hole in the wall. "Holy shit, did you kick through the wall?" I rolled my eyes. "No, dumbass. I literally just pressed on it and it gave away." Elliot looked skeptical and couldn't blame him. He stepped through and said, "Damn, it's cold in here. Was this place completely sealed?" We slowly looked around the room, inspecting the books that lined the shelves. There were some in English, some in Latin, and some languages I couldn't identify. Elliot grabbed a small black leather-bound one titled Libro Diaboli in carefully handwritten cursive. Looking a little taken aback, Elliot said quietly, "Book of the Devil?" "Jacob, was Mom into witchcraft?" We knew she was spiritual and played around with Wicca for a brief period, but it just seemed to be more of her hippie stuff, right? We carefully examined each book, and I noticed an odd trend with them. The ones on white magic nature healing seemed to have collected the most dust. Inside there were notes and scribbles of the first few pages, but nothing more. But the larger, dark books like Libro Diaboli, a thick leather one called Book of Shadows, and possibly a dozen of blood rituals hardly had any. Each of them had a personal notes and underlines. With our mother's handwriting, the most underlined word was blood. We found a small notebook, a small one with a black and white cover you could get at Walmart. In it, our mother's writing was found again, starting off neat, listing the name of some of the white magic books we found, and slowly becoming less legible as it went on. The entire pages were scratched out, some obviously torn out. On the final page, there was just one word circled, Asmodeus. Neither of us had any clue what it meant, so just set it back on the shelf. Often written into the side would be the phrases, "Mamour," and "I miss you." I suspected she went back to witchcraft in an attempt to contact our father. After her mother passed away, she tried using a Ouija board to contact her. That and crystals. We never understood it, but it didn't say a word to her about it. Finally, the air, which I felt like was steadily becoming colder, got to us, so we stepped out of the room. I noticed around where the wall gave that there was remnants of a circle symbol. Similar to the one in the middle of the room, I shrugged it off. We worked on that house for a year, never seeming to have time to fix the room that always seemed cold. And then we found the door. God forgive me. You know what happened from my brother's point of view, but allow me to show more of what was in my head. When we first met them, I was petrified, like my brother. Before me stood our mother in the dress we buried her in, our father, looking healthy as a horse. Our family was back together. By the second time, I didn't want to question it. I felt no resentment towards them. We had a meal together, an absolutely delicious meal. After living off of microwave diners, ramen, and easy-to-cook stuff, this was mind-blowing. The bread was warm, soft, and butter, and the roast was to die for. Every time we were sent back, I wanted to go back even more. When Elliot told me that the blood opened the door, I was willing to slit my wrist to open it. I considered it a few times. Now I wish I did. The door wasn't a drug, it was a gateway to something else. It became more like hunger, some kind of insatiable desire. It wasn't like heroin because I knew I could reach that same height every time, each time a little stronger. I wasn't chasing the dragon, I was being dragged by it. Elliot, being the smart one, began to know something was off. I realized he saw some of the scars on me that weren't there before. Together we might have visited 9 times, but in total, I visited 37. Each time losing more and more blood. But I preferred those trips in some ways. Mom and Dad never asked where Jacob was or when he was coming. They just focused on me. My hair began to fall out. I stopped sleeping. Hell, I started looking like my mom in her last days. When we tried to use animal blood on the door, I felt its anger. It was pure wrath. It needed our blood. No one else would do. I was not just willing, but wanting to give it everything I had when Elliot confronted me at the hotel. I broke down and promised to never return. I knew I was lying to myself and to my brother. When I was sure he was asleep, I quietly left the motel and just started walking and walking. The air was friggin', reminding me of a hidden room. A kind stranger finally gave me a ride. I don't remember anything about them. I just remember a long, silent ride, eventually reaching the house. I don't know if I thanked them, and I didn't care. When I reached the front door, I realized Elliot had the key. Swearing at myself, I ended up smashing through a window and climbing through. I ended up having my hands cut up, but at this point, did it really matter? I shakily hurried towards the old oak door when I heard a click and the front door fly open. Elliot came running towards me. He grabbed my arm and begged me to come with him. I didn't even speak. I just kept shaking away from him, but he was stronger than I was. He kept pulling and I kept resisting, till at one time he said, "Shit, your leg is bleeding. Have you already been through the door? Jacob, answer me." Placing my hand on my leg, I felt it, warm and sticky blood running down my thigh. But a little ways up, I found the cause. A large shard of broken glass was stuck in me. I had my escape. I pulled the glass out of my leg and plunged it into Elliot's neck. Shock went across his face, followed by a splatter of blood from his mouth. He stumbled back and sideways. He ended up smashing his face on the door, sliding down and ending up face down in the bowl. I couldn't make myself move. I just stared at him, his body twitching, his blood flowing into the bowl and the bowl drinking it like water. When he finally stopped moving, there was a loud click and pop of the deadbolt. And the door slowly, very slowly came open. My mother and father stood at the doorway, but their expression had no love this time. My mother let out a quiet laugh, but not soft and full of joy. It sounded like the quiet laugh of an insane person. They stood there at the doorway, both simultaneously taking a deep breath, sounding like one person, and then stepped out. As they crossed the threshold fast and light, I saw them age rapidly to their last days. My father became morbidly obese, his face red and swollen. My mother's face turning to skin and bone. Her teeth fell out and their flesh began to rot and melt together till eventually it wasn't human anymore. It grew in size and shape that grew from a malformed dragon-like body, one of a goblin-like man, one of a sheep, and one of a bull. And I heard it whisper to me in my thoughts, "I am the wine in your cup. I am the lust in your heart and the envy in your soul. I am your desire, your greed. I am behind you, whispering your temptation, and I am free." Every part of me wanted to scream, but I couldn't get a sound out. It twisted and moved across the room, but always staying in my sight. And finally, one voice came from all 3 heads of it. "I am Asmodeus," Quick as it came, it was gone. I was left alone with my brother's corpse. I ended up bringing him up to our mother's old room and setting him in the once boarded up room. I plan to rebuild everything, to cover the walls once again, and paint over everything and leave. I've murdered my brother, I've set it free, and I've damned us all. Please, to anyone who might ever come to this place again, whoever might become owners, I beg you, no matter what, there can be absolutely no renovations. The end.